Okay.
All right. So we're going to learn a little bit of Pirkei Avot, and right from the beginning. And as we mentioned before, that one of the best places to begin for people who are starting out is to learn Pirkei Avot. And there are a lot of people who are just looking to for some straight self-improvement. So once I had a sense, starting off with people, that they wanted to get some character improvement, they were just looking to make life better for themselves, they said, okay, let's start from Pirkei Avot. Because here it's the only book in the oral Torah, right? Although it's found in the Siddur, it's Mishnayos, that's dedicated entirely towards self-improvement and character development. It's the only one. Everything, the rest of Shas, the rest of the Talmud, I think like 1/7 of the Talmud is what's called homiletics, whatever you want to call that, Agadata, right? And 6/7 of it, right, is heavy duty, analytics, grinding the halacha down to the bone, trying to find out what's that?
Brachas is mostly
Yeah, well, brachas, yeah, but other receptors you'll hardly find. Yeah, so some are chock full, and some are you can go through long dry periods without any garta. For those people like Ein Yaakov, those people like those things. But when it comes to Pirkei Avot, my introduction was here we have only nice things. Why is Pirkei Avot, by the way, called Pirkei Avos? Why is it Avos? What's Avos about it? The Talmud says, Ein Avos ela shlosha. There's only 3 Avos, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Give 2 basic answers. Number 1 is that Avos that we find in Hilchos Shabbos, you have Avos and Toldos, right? Avos are the generalities, the general principles, and the details, right? The Toldos are the more fine details. So here we have the principles of life. It's not necessarily halacha, but it's the general principles. These are the unchanging principles of life. So it's not so much describing who's the speaker as what's being spoken about are the principles of life. These are the avos. It's Pirkei Avos. These are chapters. These are the principles of life. These are classic principles. It doesn't change with style. It doesn't change with historical periods. These are the classic pillars of life. Number 1. Number 2 is the Mesilas Yesharim says. It's not only Mesilas Yesharim. The Gemara says that Kol HaMelamed Beno Shel Chavero, anybody that teaches his friend Torah, is Ki'ilu Yoledam. It's like he gave birth to him. It's based upon a statement later on in Chumash that says that when they're listing the children of Moshe, they list the children of Aaron. Aaron was the father of those children. The children of he taught them Torah. So since he taught them Torah, so Kol HaMelamed Beno Shel Chavero, anybody who teaches his friend Torah is Ki'ilu Yoledam. The Mesilas Yesharim says that there are certain people in every generation that take up the cause of the generation. They're the avos. They become the fathers because, you name it. Rav Moshe Feinstein. Right? They weren't just concerned like, I got my little yeshiva, I have my little malucha over here, I have my shul, I have my balabatim, I have my talmidim. They were concerned about what's going to do with Klal Yisrael, with Aaron Cutler, right? The certain great rabbanim that took out the Chafetz Chaim. Need we say more? They became like the avos, so to speak, in that generation. They're the father. They're the daddy of the generation. I remember going to Rav Moshe Feinstein's Levaya 27 years ago and crying like a child that lost his father, and not knowing why, but knowing that we lost our father. We lost, Abba, sitting there whimpering, even though I only saw him once and we knew, he was out there, up there, but crying like that, father. We lost a father because we lost somebody who was concerned about us more than we were concerned about ourselves. To tell you the truth, that's an Abba. Sometimes our kids, anybody who's married and has children understands that we love our children. I had a dialogue with my son last night. I asked him, and maybe I shouldn't ask him. I said, do you love me? And he goes, I guess. He said, and I tell you one thing, I love you. I said, and I said, you'll understand when you'll have a child. You'll have your child. He's all of 10 years old. But he doesn't understand what the word love means. But I know what love means because I had a child. So sometimes the child loves and the Talmud affirms that the father loves the child more than the child loves the father. The Avos are the ones that they love us, and they're concerned more about us and our well-being more than we're actually concerned about ourselves. People do things that are hurtful to themselves. They're negligent with time. They waste all kinds of different, not just time, but they waste resources, and they hurt themselves, and they do negative and damaging and self-destructive things. And the father says, I'm watching this. I'm watching them go down the drain. I'm watching him kill himself. I'm watching him destroy himself. And I can't stand it. And the Chofetz Chaim was concerned about the Jews that are in Russia and the Jews that are moving to America and what's going to be with yeshivas and what's going to be. And they're going to cut off their beards and they're going to eat non-kosher food and they're going to trape up in the Shabbos and what's going to be. And he wrote letters and things because he was the father. He was the Tati of the generation. He loved the people more than the people loved themselves. They didn't love him. Because, they knew the Chofetz Chaim, they revere him, they heard about him, those who heard about him, but he loved the ones that didn't even hear about him. That's a father. That's great. Learning Pirkei Avot, I ran into a problem. And my problem went like this. Because after giving this nice introduction that Pirkei Avot is about self-improvement, about getting better, so then the Mishnah starts off like this: Moshe kibul Torah Sinai Masari Yeshua v'Yeshua Zakedim Leviim Nisaruch Lian Shekenes Gedola. Moshe got the Torah sign and gave it over to Yeshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets gave it over to the men of the Great Assembly. Veheim amru shlosha devarim, and they said three things: Havu masurim b'din, be deliberate in judgment. Hamidu samidim harbe, stand up many students. V'asu siglu Torah, and to make offense for the Torah. So what's the problem? The problem is that Pirkei Avot, which is dedicated towards character development, musar, ethics, getting better, all those kind of things, starts off with a big, chunky history lesson, right? That's a problem. Park that history lesson some other place. We could have learned that in Masechta this, Masechta Shabbos, Masechta Brachos, right? Give us the information that we need in another place. And let's start off with the they said three things. Stand up many students, right? Be deliberate in judgment. Hamidu Samidim Harbe, stand up many students, make offense for they could have told us that, without a 900-year history lesson, because Matan Torah this year will have been now 3,325 years, and the Anshe Knesset Gedolah were around at the beginning of Vayesheni, which is 2,400 years ago. So, okay, you do the math. That's a 900-year stretch of Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai, and who gave to who gave to who gave to who, until finally we hear what the men of the Great Assembly have to say. Okay, a 900-year lesson. So, where's the ethics? So I looked around in the Rishon. It always bothered me. Even if it didn't bother the people that I was introducing it to, my hair was on fire. What's the story over here? I looked around, I kicked around in the Rishonim, and the truth is, I found nice answers, but nothing that satisfied the deep itch, until I came up with a story that I'm going to share with you in a moment. The Rishonim say, for example, why do we have such a big history lesson? Because, number one, you should know that Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai Masari Yeshua, that what we're learning at Pirkei Avot is not a later invention. Rabbi Yosef Salanter spent a good part of his career trying to demonstrate to people that Musar, the father of the Musar movement, that Musar was not an afterthought. The Musar movement, like the 1800s. Okay, they came up with Musar. Musar was it's a vitamin that's abstracted from Tanakh, that's taken out from. We can trace it all back into the source. That was the original intent of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's what Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. It's not an afterthought. This is all part of Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai. This is what a Kodesh Baruch Hu is telling us from Har Sinai, but it's now being refined. So, and sometimes it looks also deceptively. So this is hot lava that's flowing from Har Sinai. It's not something that suddenly started to percolate later on, 900 years later. This is part of the original intent of the Torah. And also the words that we read in Pirkei Avot look deceptively easy. When you look at them, it looks like something that, my Aunt Tilly could have come up while she's stirring her chamomile tea and doing a little aromatherapy, Always, never, or was it never? I forget, be careful with your people's feelings, very nice, watch out, don't get mixed in with the government, very nice, something that anybody could have come up with. Watch out. This is Har Sinai stuff. This is, it looks easy, but it's not so easy. It's deep. We have to be very, very ginger with it. These are crafted words over here. So now let's take a look and appreciate with the following story. I was looking for an answer and I didn't find the answer that satisfied the deep itch. Those are nice answers by the Rishonim explaining why the history lesson is a nice entree to the three things that the men of the Great Assembly said. But when I saw the following story, I said, here it is. Where's the ethics in the history lesson? And I saw the story it's a true story. I spoke to the author about it, and he said, it's a true story. Some of the names he changed when he wrote it, and he appreciated very, very much the application of this story. He said there was a young boy that his father had passed away when he was young, and a young man, and he told his mother shortly after the Patira that he wants to take over the family business. The mother told him, you don't have to do it. We'll manage somehow. We'll get. And he says, no, he wants to take over the family business. The father, the mother said, no, you don't have to do it. But the boy insisted, and he stepped up, and he got involved with his father's business. And of course, business being what it can be, right? It's rough and tumble. Sometimes it looks a lot easier, from the grandstands than it does when you're actually in the game and playing. People like to take the seat of the critic. You ever watch a baseball game from the stands? Oh, the guy whiffed for a third time. Go down there and face a 95-mile-an-hour fastball that might be a curve or a changeup, and see if you can see the ball. See if you have a chance to react to it. It ain't easy. A lot of things that people do, they look easy from a distance. They get into the business. Anybody can do business. Yeah. Then you get involved with it, and you find out how many different, how strenuous it can be. And now, and of course, competitors being what they always are, they took advantage of his naivete and his lack of experience. And of course, in a short period of time, before he had learned the hard-won lessons of business, they cut him off here. They took away his customer base over there. Suddenly, he finds himself no money, no money to advertise, nothing to put back into the bit. Suddenly, he finds himself stuck, dead-ended. And the accountant came to him, and it looks like he fumbled what his father had spent an entire lifetime to build up. And you can imagine the devastation when it occurred to him. And he sat in his office with his head bobbing between his legs, crying like a little child, wondering how he's going to face his mother, how he's going to face himself, how he's going to face his creditors, what's going to be. And at that darkest of all moments, a knock comes at the door, and we'll give a name over here. A distinguished gentleman comes into the room, reaches into his pocket, and pulls out a big fat envelope and drops it in front of this young man. This is a story from many, many years ago, from 30, 40 years ago. The fellow peeks into the envelope, he starts to thumb through, and the young boy, and he counts $50,000. Maybe that's like, $500,000 nowadays. Wow. I remember my grandmother sold her house for like $15,000. Now it's like a $400,000 house. And we can imagine how pricey. But he gave $50,000. Young boy looks into the envelope, thinking about his mother, thinking about his situation. But he reminds himself. He says, something? I've got pride. I'm not a charity taker. We've always been charitable people. We give. We're not takers. And he, with great strength, Samson's strength, he pushes the envelope away to this Reb Pinkus. Reb Pinkus holds the envelope for a second, explains to him, he says, this is not a grant. The young man said, we're givers, we're not takers, I'm not taking it. He says, it's not a grant, it's a loan. And he pushes the envelope back in front of this young man. This young boy looks into the envelope again, thinks about it for a moment, and says, I'm a credit risk. I haven't got with what to back up this loan. I can't, I'm not allowed to take a loan. And he pushes the money away again. Again, this Reb Pinkus pushes it back in front of him and tells him, I'll take that risk, and that'll be on my cheshbon. He says, and it's a loan when and or if you're ever able to pay it back. Okay, the boy's thinking about his family, thinking about his mother, thinking about his father in heaven, and he says, something? An angel I'm not. He takes the money. This Reb Pinkus turns around and walks away, and now this young man, having learned those hard-won lessons of business, so now he gets to work right away, grinding. He starts up production. Starts making calls on customers. Suddenly, the whole thing wakes up, and within a few short years, the story is that this fellow took his father's business far beyond his father or anybody else's wildest expectations. And now, with great ease and pride, he skims off the top of the business $50,000, stuffs it into an envelope, and marches back to this guy's Reb Pinkus's office. Knocks on the door, fellow invites him in, reaches into his pocket, and drops an envelope in front of him, $50,000. Reb Pinkus peers into the envelope, thumbs through, counts $50,000, says, I'm not accepting it. He says, what do you mean you're not accepting it? He says, it's $50,000. Not more, not less. It's not ribis, it's not, and not, he said, I'm the fellow, he says, I know you are. You loaned me $50,000. And now I'm paying you back, everything, and it's okay now. I'm making it good. I'm succeeding. It's not a hardship. So here's the money back. It's a loan. He says, I realize it's a loan. You're doing nicely. I'm so happy. He says, but I'm not accepting it. Doesn't make any sense. If it's a loan, you got to accept it. He said, no. He says, let me explain. So Pinchas tells him the following story. It's a story within a story. Don't worry, there is an end to it, okay? Seemingly an end. And Rabbi Pinchas says the following thing. He says, 30 years ago, he says, I'm running a rip-roaring business. He says, for the last 30 years, I'm sorry. He says, and gangbusters. He says, I have hundreds of employees. I have people that also, that don't even know that I'm their source of income. I'm giving charity to institutions and to individuals. He says, one time, a couple of years ago, he says, I reached a little high too quickly. He says, and suddenly that risk was so great, my feet went out from underneath me in one fell swoop. He says, I fumbled what I had spent my whole life doing. He said, and when it dawned on me that I had lost everything, I'm starting to think to myself, what am I going to do? What's going to be with all those people that are waiting for the support? What's going to be with all my employees? What's going to be with their families? Oh my gosh, what's going to be with me? What's going to be with my family? My head was hanging between my legs and I was lost. I was the most distraught person you can't even imagine. I don't know where to turn. How am I going to look at myself in the mirror? I did something so foolish. He says, and at that darkest of all moments, he says, believe it or not, a knock came at my door. And a man came in and he stood in front of me. I don't know who this fellow is. And he dropped in front of me an envelope. I looked in the envelope and I count there $50,000. That's a large sum of money. And the fellow says, I said, you know something, but I'm a giver of charity. I'm not a receiver of charity. I'm not giving out. I'll make it somehow. He says, no, it's not charity. It's a loan. I told him I'm a credit risk. I can't take money at this point and a loan, just a regular straight loan. I have nothing to back it up with. I've lost everything. He says, the loan went in there if you're ever able to pay it back. He says, but if you're ever able to pay it back, he says, don't pay it to me. He says, pay it to somebody else. He says, the day that I came and I knocked on your door, he says, that was the day that I repaid my loan. He says, and now I want you to go and do the same thing. He said, I want you to research and find somebody who you think is worthy, somebody who's going to do the right by this money. He's not just going to take it and to spend it frivolously, and encourage them and help them that they should be able to build up their family business and then pass it on successfully to somebody else. Now we go back and we revisit our Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that says the following thing. Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe got the Torah at Sinai. And he gave it up to Yeshua. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do with the Torah? Moshe could have kept the Torah all by his loads himself, right? He had quite a spiritual uplift, going into the heavens for 40 days and 40 nights and learning the whole oral Torah, right? And when he came down, he could have dug a hole in the ground someplace and buried himself in the basement, and his wife Zipporah is there banging on the door saying, Moshe, come on up. What's that funky smell down there? You're burning Kataris again? Oh, he's getting high in Kabbalah. Who knows? Moshe could have sat there and done all, and had a great time by himself. But no, that's not what he did. Moshe Rabbeinu spent 40 years building up the family business, irrigating the hearts and minds of Klal Yisrael, of 600,000 adult males between the ages of 60, of 3.5 million people, teaching them Torah, preparing them for the mitzvah of V'shinantam levanecha, that they should be able to teach sharply into the minds and the hearts of their children, to be able to give it over. And then, before he passed on, he passed it over to the next pair of responsible hands. He gave it over to Yeshua. Yeshua spent 14 years settling the Jewish people into the land of Israel. After 14 years, he passed it over to the elders, to the judges, and then finally came the era of prophets, of Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im did the same thing, judging and informing the people and warning them about the imminent destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and then they gave it over to the men of the Great Assembly, who lasted until the beginning of Bayesheni. And finally we hear what they said, V'heim amru shlosha devarim, and the three things that they said are relevant to this point over here, which is really, that's the musar, that's the ethics that's in the musar. We'll see in a second. And what is that? Havu musunim bedin. How is it that you keep this thing going from the beginning? Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. How is it that we keep it going? So the principle is, be deliberate in making judgment. Who do you marry? Where do you live? which yeshiva you go to, which shir you go to, whatever it is, what type of friends you're hanging out with. There's all kinds of different determinations that a person makes. Havul musunim, be very deliberate. Don't make snap decisions. Don't suddenly, it's like, I'm leaving and pulling my kids out from this yeshiva and burn a bridge any place. Don't cut it so quickly. Don't be so quick to jump into something. Don't be so quick to get out of something. All these are life, very, very great life decisions. Some people, they decide, I'm not going to live here, and they moved out to some place where there's no Yiddishkeit. And they're paying the price. They cut themselves away from generations, and their children away from the generations. I can't tell you, how many people, how many stories you hear about people. They lived in the midbar someplace. They lived nowhere, and there was no Jewish education for their children, and nothing turned out for the future. And they said, and what happened? What happened? They did it. They made a quick decision. They went here for a job, and then the job dried up, and they ended up being stuck for something else. Instead of finding out what the right thing to do is, consulting Das Torah. Next thing is Hamidu Salmidim Harbe, stand up many students, have as many children, give as much charity, do as much as you possibly can, accomplish as much as you can in your lifetime, right? Hayom hu katzer v'malacha maruba, do as much as you possibly can. Build up the family business. That's what we're talking about here. Build up the family business, and then finally give it successfully over to the next pair of hands, the next generation, and that means the associated with Torah, make a fence for the Torah. The fence that we have for the Torah are the things that protect the integrity of the Torah. We have a fence for Shabbos, for example. What does the fence for Shabbos do? It protects the integrity of Shabbos. Right? So we say, we're changing, we're adding on. Kol ha-mosef gorei, if you're adding on, you're taking away. The fence we have for Shabbos, for example, muktzah, whatever you want, the gezeres and the kanas that we have to protect Shabbos, those fences, it's like when you go to see the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, right? It's a priceless painting. So they put a plexiglass, thing in front of it, a plexiglass plate in front of it, so you can appreciate it, and they put it in a hermetically sealed room so that the atmosphere doesn't change and doesn't begin to cause that she should chip. And then they put some electric beams over there that if any cholera, any fool should try to get too close and make a high collar for her, or to change her smile into a smirk or something like that. So there's something there to protect her. So in order that we should have the same Shabbos that they had 3,324 years ago. So we put all these other things in place. So the same thing, we're passing on the currency. We should pass on the same currency that we received. Some people received a certain currency, a gold standard, a Moshe Kibbutz Torah Misinai, a Zichru Torah Moshe currency, but they gave over to their children, something else, a Confederate currency. They gave over some cheap bills, right? We know about it. That it wasn't exactly what our grandparents and our great grandparents received. So it's a watered down version. It's not the real thing. So this is the whole premise. So what's the first ethic? The first ethic is that if you get something good, make good use out of it and pass it on to somebody else. Somebody asked Rabbi Miller one time. He asked Rabbi Miller. Says, what happens? He says, if you find a good sefer in the Beis Medrash. He says, what should you do after you find a good sefer and you learned it in the Beis Medrash? What should you do? He says, put it back on the shelf so somebody else can learn it. Right? Replace yourself also. There's a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. Keep it going. Replace yourself. Do the mitzvah Puruvu. Husband and wife should have a son and a daughter. At least replace yourself. Leave the world in as good an order as the way you found it. I once heard from Rabbi Miller, try to leave the place wherever you are in a better shape than the way you found it, wherever it is that you happen to go. You go to the park and there's some papers on the floor, so pick up not only what you left on the floor, but pick up whatever somebody else left on the floor. Try to leave the world a little bit improved. Build up the family business and pass it on to the next person. That's what it's all about. What's that? Tikkun. Okay, whatever you want to call it. That's an abused term, so I'm going to steer away from it. I'll explain why. It's been hijacked, unfortunately, like many other terms. Right? But the premise is build yourself up and build up the family business, and then pass it on successfully to somebody else. It always happens. By the way, I've mentioned this idea before at, let's say, a father and son brunch. Not the first time I put this idea together. I just thought of it right now. And there's always one character that comes up to me afterwards, and I would anticipate it after mentioning it here also. Maybe somebody might even thought of it, and that is usually it's the male from the species, because it's if I've mentioned it in the mixed group at my daughter's graduation, I said over the same idea, and there was some guy comes over and says, "Yeah, Rabbi, where's the guy with the $50,000?" There's always one guy that's still looking. He got distracted by who's the guy with the $50,000? They're still looking for him. And I remember the first time I was taken a little bit back by the notion, and I realized, what are you talking about, $50,000? You're still looking for the guy with the $50,000. You didn't understand what we're talking about over here. $50,000 is nothing. What is $50,000? $50,000 is nothing. If you compare what we have today in our hands, right? Given blood, sweat, tears, and tuition over the course of the last, we said, 3,325 years, that we have a Sefer Torah. And we can lift it up in shul and say, Zosa Torah, Asher Sam Moshe Lefnei Bnei Israel Al Pi Hashem B'Yad Moshe. That's the Torah. Right? Think about that. That's incredible. That we have the same Torah intact. I don't have to tell you that the New Improved Testament, you know what I'm talking about? J.C. Penney over there, you know what I'm talking about? So that book over there is a book that's a quarter of the size, half the age, and maybe there's something like 50 or 60 or 70,000 different versions, right, of that book that they don't even know what it says. And if you ask the Pope himself, right, and you ask him what language was it originally written in, they don't even know what the original language that it was written in. Was it written in Latin? Was it written in Greek? Was it written in Aramaic? Was it written in Hebrew? Give them a multiple choice over there, and the answer is, I don't know. They don't know. And we have the same Torah. Not only we have the same Torah, but we know when it says Zachar Yom Shabbos Lakasha, that we know what that means. With the millions and millions of little details. We have the 30,000 details that go into the making of the comprising, that go into tefillin, those little black boxes that we wear. And with the mezuzah that goes on the door, it's 5,000 details. And the tzitzis is many hundreds of details. And we have all those details. We know exactly how to construct all of these things. We know what to do. So we have a Torah Shebal Peh. We have Talmidei Chachamim. We have people who know how to decode in Aramaic and know how to learn. It's an amazing thing. We have a community of people who are Shomer Shabbos. That we have a Torah in our hands, that we have yeshivas that children can learn how to have the key to open up these things. It's an amazing thing if you think about it. Let's talk about it. So what is that worth over the course of time and history, given the Mesiras Nefesh of generation to generation, that baton handing over? So a Sefer Torah itself is a $20,000 item. But if you give it that we have the original Sefer Torah, it's something which is worth more than $50,000. Let's think about it. Let's analyze that for a second. Where's the guy with the $50,000? That's not what we're talking about over here. We have a prize. You get that prize, you build it up, you do the best thing, that's what a Kodesh Baruch wants, and then you pass it on handily to the next generation. That's what it's all about. I saw a bumper sticker that says, maybe the hokey pokey really is what it's all about. Right? But maybe this is what it's really all about. That's what the mission in Pirkei Avot is telling us. Okay? Maybe you guys don't even know what the hokey pokey is. I'm so sorry. But we know. What's your name again? Yossi. So Yossi and I, we know. We went to enough conservative bar mitzvahs. You put your right. You got these elderly ladies. You put your right arm in, and you shake it all about. Oh my gosh, that's what you have to witness over there. And you do the hokey pokey. Every bar mitzvah was that and Hava Nagila. So the bumper sticker says. So people think that that's what Yiddishkeit is. And maybe they play it at a Met game or something like that. And you do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself about. That's what it's all about. Okay, so that's not what it's all about. This talk is what it's all about. So now, I think the corollary story to this. My wife and I, Baruch Hashem, we had a schus a number of years ago that we spent the Shabbos with Pesach Kron. I'm sure some people heard of Rabbi Pesach Kron. Yeah, okay. And believe it or not, he told a few stories. Okay, you can just suspend your imagination and. So he said a number of stories. I don't remember all the stories, actually. There was too many to remember. But one of the stories that did stay and lodge itself in my mind is he told a story about a fella. His name, the fella's name is Tzvi Kamenetsky, I think. He lived in Chicago. And he's a fella that he and his wife apparently did not have children for a number of years. And they wanted a child very badly. And then Baruch Hashem, after a number of years, Kodesh Baruch Hu granted them that his wife should be expecting a child. Now, after she was expecting a child, so hoping, okay, we're going to go full term. Somewhere, 5th month or something like that, suddenly the wife goes to the hospital and she gives birth to a premature child. Okay, a premature child can be like a pound or two, like a tub of cottage cheese. It's not such a, and yet all the pieces are there. So they have the child in the incubator, in preemie care, and they have these nurses working, under the warm lights over there, feeding the child with an eyedropper. Months and months and months go by until finally they're able to take him home. in good strength, and they got the green light that they give him a bris milah and they give him a Jewish name. So the father was so excited that finally, after so many months, they had years, they had a child, months, they finally were able to take the child home, and they gave him a name, and they named him Yaakov, after the great-grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzaddik Ubracha, used to live in Muncie. Used to see him all the time on Saddle River Road. So now the father was, feeling, his heart is brimming with gratitude, and he was trying to think, what can I do to show my gratitude to those nurses, and the hospital staff that had dedicated themselves and put in so many endless hours into caring day and night for my little Yaakov Kamenetsky. So he wrote down and started writing up a short list of, let me see, flowers, balloons, and chocolates, right? And then he said, okay, great. So now he went and he put this, list together, and then he did something, Rabbi Kron said he did something that you and I would not probably do, and that is he called up his Rosh Hashiva at that time, Rabbi Yisvei, and he said, Rosh Hashiva, what should I do? He says, in order to show my gratitude, he says, to these nurses, he says, chocolates, balloons, or flowers. What does Rosh Hashiva think? Like, which of the three? Because that's all he could think of. And the Rosh Hashiva told him, he says, don't get them anything. Rabbi Yisvei was a stark, the Rosh Hashiva filled up. He said, don't get them anything. He says, I want to show my karsa tov. I want to show gratitude. Hapam odas Hashem. What does it mean to be a Jew? I want to show my gratitude. Moda'ani. What a Jew would wakes up in the morning. He says, Moda'ani. What am I? I'm a moda. I'm an acknowledger. I'm acknowledging Hashem. I'm a thanking creature. That's what we are. The whole Chovos Levovos is built upon the Yesod, the foundation that a person needs to say thank you, has an intrinsic need, has an intrinsic instinct to say thank you, to be grateful. So you have to lecture the Rosh Hashiva on what it means to be a Jew. Of course, you want to say thank you. But don't get them anything. He says, but this is what you do. He asked them the following question. He says, what was the gift? What was the reward that was given to those nursemaids, right? Those miliados ha'ivrios, those Jewish nursemaids, Shifra and Pua, alias Yocheved and Miriam in the Chumash. What was the reward that was given to them for their devotion and their self-sacrifice for the Jewish children that they were taking care of? And the answer is, huh? So the pasuk. So the pasuk that popped into my mind was Vayas lehem batim. Okay, I knew someone was going to come with this. I right away said Vayas lehem batim. Of course, as we say in the game shows. So sorry, because there's a pasuk that actually comes before them, and it slips under the radar. That's the second pasuk. It says V'yetev Elokim. Kodesh Baruch Hu benefited miliados to those nursemaids. V'yerev ha'am v'atzmo ma'od. That what happened was that they increased, the nation increased, and they became very strong. So what was the reward? That they saw the handiwork of their hands increasing and multiplying and getting stronger under their care and under their watch. So he said, based on that, he says, you go back to that hospital on the first birthday of this child, and you say, this is the child that you took care of last year. You come back on his second birthday, you parade him around, you say, this is the child you took care of 2 years ago. You go back on the third birthday, and you take him around, and you show him, this is the child you took care of 3 years, and 4 years, and 5 years, and 6 years, and every year you come back on his birthday, and you display the child, and you say, this is the child that you took care of, thank you. That's what you do, you show them the child. He goes, okay. And that's what he did. He came back every year. Before the 13th birthday, this boy now is already married. My son, told me, I once telling the story, he says, Abba, he says, he's getting married this weekend. He's married. My son knows his brother in Philadelphia Yeshiva also. So Baruch Hashem, he's married. He's on with life. But right before his 13th birthday, the father comes to the hospital, and he says, he puts up a note inviting anybody who wants to come join. We have a milestone event. We have the birthday of the child you took care of 13 years ago. Thank you very much. And we're making a community meal. Anybody wants to come? And he spells it out for him. And Rabbi Kron had it in his possession. I'm jealous he has the letter from this
from the head of nursing, and he has it laminated, and it reads something to the effect like this. She says, she goes, we're not going to be able to make it. Thank you for the nice invitation. We're not going to be able to make it. But we just wanted to let you know that this is a very difficult job. I was not even on staff 13 years ago when your child was being taken care of. Very few, if any, of us were here at that time, because it's such a delicate and difficult and dangerous work that we're doing that people burn out quickly and they move on to other areas of the hospital to do different types of work. So she goes on to explain that but you should know that since it is such a high burnout rate. So when we're training our staff for this difficult job, that one of the things that we tell them, we always say that people don't see the results of the work that they're doing. Because if you work with this child, the one that you're working with, he could be like that little boy Yaakov Kamenetsky that comes around once a year. That little child that you're working on, he could be like that young boy Yaakov Kamenetsky that comes strolling in to visit us once a year. She said he became the poster child for success that we never see whatever else that we're doing, But you're the one has created a picture, of what's possible in front of us. And she goes, and although you come to thank us and to give us, encouragement, she says, you have no idea what type of encouragement that you have given us, And then he writes a little postscript on the bottom of that letter. She writes the following thing. She goes, a lot of people have brought us over the years flowers and balloons and chocolates. And the balloons, deflate, and the flowers fade, and we know what happens with the chocolates. She says, but what you have given us is something far beyond anything you could possibly imagine. Isn't that unbelievable? Now let's just imagine for a second. First of all, take a look at how a Gadol B'Yisrael, learns a piece of Chumash L'maisa. Learns it it's reality. Kihem Chayenu. It's not just, history. Oh, what happened to Shifra and Puah and Yocheved and Miriam? It's Lamaisa, And take a look at the advice that you get when you ask a true Gadol B'Yisrael, for a practical piece of advice, how he's able to take and extract out a piece of Chumash, that this is the practical piece of advice over here. And look at how beautiful this piece of advice is. It's unbelievable. And if you think about it, that when somebody wants to say thank you to another person, a child wants to say thank you to his parents. So what does he do? He invites them for Shabbos. You want to say thank you to your Rebbe, someone who taught you Torah. So what do you do? So you invite them. What does the Rebbe want more than anything else? Right? He wants that to hear that you're doing, like we mentioned in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, that you took the gift that he gave him, that you're using it, and you're passing it on successfully to the next generation. When I see that my kids are doing Haknasas Orchim, or that they're having children of their own, and they're raising them better than the way we raised them, then that's the biggest gift. That they took the education, that the yeshiva education that we paid for and that we struggled to pay for, and they're using it, and they're building up a family, and they're building the family business, they're carrying it forward. Then that's the thanks that they could possibly give. So if somebody wants to say thank you, if somebody wants to show appreciation, they want to show a karsa tov, so we carry the gift forward, right? That's why I think that this story, the second story, is a beautiful corollary to the first mice. I want to tell you something very interesting thing. A couple of weeks ago, we had a yeshiva dinner, and this story popped into my mind. And actually, I was thinking about it in Parshas Vayechi, when we talked about Yaakov Avinu, when he came, that famous, scene where he crosses his hands on the top of Ephraim and Menashe, and he puts his right hand on the top of the younger one, which is the stronger bracha going to the younger one, and the weaker bracha going to the older one. Here we go again. It looks like it's going to be one of those scenes. What happens? So the Chumash tells us, nothing happened. Right? And therefore, because nothing happened, so it's our all-time custom that when we give a blessing to the boys on Friday night, right? And I don't know how many people have the custom, or have been recipients of the custom, right? We put our hands on top of a boy's head, and we say, Yisimcha Elokim K'Ephraim v'Cha Menashe. Hashem should make you like Ephraim and Menashe. Why Ephraim and Menashe? For the girls, right? It's not equivalent. We say Yisimech Elokim K'Sar Rivka Rachav Aleah. It should be like Sar Rivka Rachav Aleah. So it should be that when we bless the boys, there should be Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Let's keep it equal, right? Why do we make it like this? What's the lack of equivalence for? So there's something special about the Ephraim and Menashe. Two answers, the classic answers that are given. What's the classic answers? Number one is that they survived in Gullus. Here's two, we want our kids to be able to survive in Gullus. They were down in Mitzrayim. They were away from Yaakov Avinu. They were disconnected. They're there with, his father was involved with politics, and still they became, that they were able to be like the Shvatim, just like the Shvatim. If you think about it, they became Shvatim. Ephraim and Menashe are Shvatim. Right? Growing up in Mitzrayim, growing up in America, an American Gadol, not in Eretz Israel, disconnected, but still a person could become something even in a foreign land. It's not influenced by the environment. Look what happened with them. It's unbelievable. What an accomplishment. And the other thing they say is that when it came time to receive the bracha, even though Zaidi Yaakov crossed his hands over there for the first time in many, many generations, there was no sudden explosion or disrupt or rancor that suddenly, what's he going first? Me Barosh, I'm the oldest one, Dad. Yosef tried to say, Dad, you're crossing the wires over here. You might get an explosion when you try to charge the battery like that. You got to cross. You got the wires crossed. You don't know. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Okay, but Ephraim and Menashe, we don't see that they slugged it out after that. So it came Sheket, Shalva, Shalom. They had peace between them. So I was always wondering, how did they survive in Gullus? Number one, and number two, why didn't they fight? We don't. Okay, they didn't fight. Okay, they survived in Gullus. How did they survive in Gullus? Why didn't they fight? So I saw the following story. That there was a fellow. His name was Captain Charles Plum. Okay, I saw the story and I said, I think sometimes you see an answer story that looks like the story fits on a hand on a glove. This is maybe part of the explanation. And this Captain Charles Plum, during the Vietnam War, he was shot down after flying some 70 some odd missions as a Navy pilot, and he threw off the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, and he was shot down, and he had parachuted to safety, but he ended up being captured by the enemy, and he spent 6 years as a POW, tortured, beaten, went through all kinds of different, Sheva Maduri Gehenim, and then after coming out whole, so he now speaks and gives chizuk, he gives encouragement all over the world to Gentile audiences and to corporations or whatever, on how do you make it, how do you live with difficulty, how do you make it through difficulties, He became Ein Chocham Kabal Hanasoyin. There's no wise person like somebody who's been through stuff, yeah? So, gewaltig. So I happened to caught my eye a story that he tells, that one time while he was sitting in a restaurant in Kansas someplace, there was a fellow that was eyeballing him, kept on looking up at him, and eventually became conscious that this guy keeps on looking up at him, and they locked eyes, and the fellow came over to his table and said, "You're Captain Plum, aren't you?" He says, "Yes." He says, "You flew in over 70 some odd missions, over the..." "Yes, I did." He says, "You were shot down. You parachuted to safety." He says, "It's me." He says, "You were on the Kitty Hawk." He starts to give him certain details about everything that, and then even details that, that were identifiable that not everybody could know. He goes, "It seems like you know quite a bit about me." He says, "Yes." He says, How do you know? How do you know all this?" He says, "Because I'm the fella who packed your parachute. I'm the guy who packed your parachute. Down in the bowels of that ship on the Kitty Hawk, that was my job, was to knit the strings and to fold the 18 panels of the parachute." He says, "I was packing parachutes. You don't know if somebody's ever going to need it. They may need it, they may not need it." I said, "I never thought, I never imagined, I forgot, if the parachute had that function, I would have nothing to talk about. There'd be no one to talk." He hugged him. They cried. They talked into the night. And he said, his mind kept on thinking about, I met the fella who, under the radar, down beneath the water level in the bowels of the ship, is the one that's packing the parachute. And he says, and I thanked him, and I thanked him, and thanked him. He says, and now he never fails when he speaks to a new audience. He tells them this little story, this little anecdote. He says, and he asked the audience, he says, "Who packed your parachute? Who packed your parachute? Which teacher, which parent, which Rebbe, which, you name it, what gave you your emotional strength?" I have a picture in my mind. Who was it that gave you the encouragement that you need, that you wouldn't be here today if it wouldn't have been for their, their push and their belief and their confidence that you had in you? Who packed your parachute? I have a dear grandmother. When I told the story over, my mother heard it. She goes, "It was Grandma. It wasn't me. I'm going to take credit away from it. She goes, it was her grandmother used to call me Manzisa Neshama. Oh, Manzisa Neshama. Oh, Manzisa Neshama. She called me Zisa Neshama. I didn't feel like a Zisa Neshama, at the time. But she looked at like she didn't look at hair and feet and eyes and hands and sporting accomplishments and that. She looked right into the neshama. Zisa neshama, zisa neshama. Somebody looked inside and saw potential, and was able to somehow stimulate that potential. So there's certain people who packed your parachute. It's unbelievable. I remember I said at the dinner, "Who's packing the parachutes for yeshiva? Who's packing the parachutes for our children? The children in the community." But now you go back to Yaakov Avinu and what happened over there when the hands crossed and what was that scene over there? So the whole time they're sitting over thinking, Ephraim and Menashe said, who packed our parachute? Our Abba. He's the one that knows how to survive in exile. He's our Rebbe. He's the one that taught us. And suddenly Yaakov Avinu is introduced into the scene over there. He says, "You know something? You know who packed your father's? You know who packed Yosef's parachute? Yaakov packed Yosef's parachute. Everything that he did, everything Yaakov did happened in the same life, happened similarly in the life of Yosef. Whatever Yaakov went through, Yosef went through. And Yaakov was able to survive. Im Lavan Garti, V'Taryag Mitzvah Shmarti. He was able to keep the 613 mitzvahs, even though he's the one that became the Rebbe of how to survive in Galus, how to survive in exile. And Yaakov was Ben Zukunim Hulo. He was a Bar Chachima. He was his wise student. It wasn't just his old son. Like he likes him because he's an old man. He's my little boy. He loved him because this was his prime student. And he equipped him. He's the one that packed your parachute. Standing over there, his arms are getting crossed over there. Says, we can't get cross with him. And we can't fight because he's the one that packed our parachute. He's the one that taught us how to survive in Gullus. And he's the one also that we have to be grateful for. We can't fight about this. We're standing in front of in the face of the person who packed our parachute. So a person wants to show gratitude to the people who packed our parachute. So the way that we do it is we build up the family business and we take it forward. I said over something like this in a shir recently, in a lady shir in the 5 towns, and a woman came over to me that she said, I was at a seminar that I was involved, that you were involved with, that I was involved with 20 years ago. She goes, "You packed my parachute." Okay, I'm sure other people were involved with the packing the parachute, but you meet people that, and what's the biggest nachas is, and now I'm married and I have a few kids and I'm doing, now you're doing something, from the event that we put effort into, from this action that we took, suddenly you're taking these things and you're moving it forward. That's the best gift that a person can give going forward. Now, just to show that Pirkei Avot has a consistent theme, let's just take a look over here at the next mission in Pirkei Avot, and I would like to just demonstrate that really it's a similar thing. I don't have to look inside. Everybody knows Shimon HaTzadik, Knesset Gedola. Shimon HaTzadik was from the remnant of the Knesset Gedola, which means that there were 120 people in the Anshe Knesset Gedola, and they didn't replace their parts. Right? It wasn't like patch pants, or like they kept on replacing somebody when they passed away. Started out 120, amongst whom were Nevi'im and Chachamim, and then by the end, there was the last man standing was Shimon HaTzadik Haya Mishiari Knesset Gedola. V'hu Haya Omer, and he used to say, right, Ashlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed, the world is standing on 3 things: Al HaTorah, V'al Havoda, V'al Gemilas Chasadim. Right? Okay, everybody knows that. Okay. Question is, what's Gemilas Chasadim? What's Gemilas Chasadim? When it comes to Torah, all it says is Torah. Very nice. When it comes to Avoda, it could have said Torah, could have said Talmud Torah, could have said Limud Torah, could have said Asik Torah. Torah. We're keeping our words very short over here. It could have been a little bit more descriptive. Hello, what type of Torah are we talking about? It could have said Tomech Torah, supporting Torah. A lot of things it could have said Torah. Right? Any involvement with Torah? Torah. When it comes to Avoda, it could have said Avoda Shebalev, Avoda Beis Hamikdash. It could have said Avoda Hashem. It could have been a lot of Avodas. It could have said, now it said Avoda. One word. We're giving one on 3 things the world said on Torah, like a tripod right here. Beautiful. Isn't that it? Torah, Avoda, and all of a sudden, we got one of them has 2-pronged Gemilas Chasadim. What's man's gemilas chasadim? Right? What is gemilas chasadim as opposed to chesed? She said chesed. Chesed will be fine. Yeah, chesed. Al shlosh devarim hol ha'moed, al Torah, al vod v'al chesed. Although I saw recently now that gemilas chasadim is the same gematria as the word Torah. Okay, nice, but that's not enough to justify adding a whole other chunky word over there. Hello. You know that the Mishnah is very spare. So I would like to explain what gemilas chesed is. We'll leave Torah on the side, right? And we'll leave avodah on the side. Why is gemilas chesed? Gemilas chesed. What's the difference between chesed and gemilas chesed? Because I asked a lot of people. I looked around. I researched. I didn't find anybody says anything about it. I'll tell you the truth. But I think I came up with an answer that I've shared with a number of scholarly audiences, and which I'm always afraid to speak in front of a real, you got the real lions over there that tear up every word, that hear things that, that you didn't even mean to say, and I got a nod and agreement that Taka, Label, you say a lot of foolish things, but this one you might have hit it, okay? You say a lot of Purim Torah, but and a lot of Megiddos, but I think you might have pierced the veil over here, okay? And so what does gemilas chesed mean? So and why is it different than just straight up random chesed? And gemilas chesed goes like this. Gemilas means the word gimel, right? Let's analyze the word gemal, gemilas chesed. So what is gimel? So it's 3 letters, gimel, mem, lamed. If we want to analyze a word, the Hebrew language is really a chemistry set. Yeah? It's different than the English language. English language, C-A-T. Let's analyze the word cat. C means you see. A, what does A mean? Okay. What does C mean? C doesn't mean anything. A doesn't mean anything. T doesn't mean anything. It's an ideographic language, right? It only tells you how to pronounce stuff. That's all. It only tells you pronunciation. It's arbitrary. It's happened to be an agreed upon means of saying that these sounds mean something, and then an icon pops into the mind of a little guy with a tail and who's chasing after a mouse. That's what it is. Cat doesn't mean anything. It's an agreed upon term. And you go to the Far Eastern language, and they show you a picture of a cat or a picture of a house. But there's no way. There's no pronunciation in the letters. It's pictographic, but it's not ideographic. You go back to Hebrew, and that's the original language. It's ideographic and it's pictographic. It's sounds and it's pictures. Right? So one of the secrets of trying to it's more like a chemistry set than it is a language that's only here to communicate with pictures like cavemen and like sounds just to tell us a convenience of so we can have a means of communication of getting ideas across. So for example, if you want to know what the meaning of a letter is, you go back to the original letter. The time it was first used in Chumash, not as a prefix. Like the letter Vav, for example, is used most often as a prefix in Chumash. It's used most often at the beginning of a word in Chumash than any other letter. However, you have to wait all the way until the construction of the Mishkan to find the first time that it's ever used not as a prefix in a word, as the first letter in a word. And that word is Vavei Ha'amudim, right? Which is the hooks that are holding the urias, the curtains of the Mishkan together. So what does Vav mean? Vav, it's spelled over there. Vavei Ha'amudim, it means a hook. You look at the letter Vav, right? And it looks like a hook. And what does the letter Vav do grammatically? It acts like a hook. That's what it is. It connects. And, past, present, past, season to season, action to action, tense to tense. That's what it does. That's what the letter Vav does. It's a connector. So beautiful. So now we understand what the letter Vav. The Vav means, as a matter of fact, the Zohar calls it the Os HaDas. It's the letter of knowledge, right? Das means the Adam Yada is Chava Ishta, Adam knew his wife. It means to connect things in an intimate way. Okay, we can analyze, we can take letters, and actually, if we understood the meaning of each letter, we can actually figure out what the meanings of the words are based upon the combinations of concepts that are buried, embedded in the letters themselves. It's it's an amazing, amazing thing. We should spend the whole night just doing that. We can spend the whole month just doing that, and it just might curl your hair, And if you don't have hair, it'll grow it back. Okay? Yeah. Matter of fact, that might be a good product to sell. You know, we're gonna learn in such a way it's gonna grow your hair back. You can advertise that one on the radio. Yeah. So what happened? So if you take the letter, for example, Gimel. So what does a Gimel mean? So the first time that Gimel is used in the Chumash, not as a prefix, okay? It doesn't. The first time you find it, it doesn't. It has a prefix in front of it, and the prefix is Hey. But the word itself is Teninim ha-gedolim. So the word gedolim, the first time you find, it's talking about the big, antediluvian sea creatures or whatever they are. And it really, so gedolim means big, growing. So anytime you find gimel at the beginning of a word, gimel means growing, amplification. That's what gimel means. That's part of what gimel means, expanding. Beautiful. What does mal mean? Mal. Mal means like mila, cut. So we're getting insight into what's a gamal. Gamal means growing, cutting. Growing, cutting. What is that about? So also we know that the shem ha'os, we said C doesn't mean anything and B doesn't mean anything, the letter B in English, but the letter gamal, gimel, means something. What is gimel? It's related to the word gamal. What's a gamal? Camel. What's the specialty of a camel? I once heard from Rabbi Wein, he says that a camel was a horse made by a committee. Okay, that was when you get a group of people working on something, but it looks like it's a very awkward creature. Now I open up an animal gemach over here, or a rent an animal, rent a beast. And people come to my come to my shop and they said, I'd like to have a piano to schlep, to take across the street. Okay, bring out Jim. Bring out a donkey for the guy. Brings out a donkey, and the donkey's going to carry a refrigerator. He's going to carry a piano across the street. That's what he's good for. He said, I need to get a letter quickly to the other side of town. Bring over this Arabian horse. And he's going to go running off into the, across town with a rider and its letter. I got to take a 50-mile trip, a 100-mile trip, and it's going to go through barren and desert land. Fuel up a camel, give him fill him up with water. That's what the humps are for. He's got a storage bin of water. He can fill up and he can go for a long time. It means he can fill himself up, he can grow, and then he can cut himself from his source. Right? That's the concept of gamal. Gamal means something grows, it expands to a certain point, and then it cuts off from a source. A fruit on a tree grows to a certain point, and at some point it becomes burdensome to the tree, and then now it naturally drops off, and it rolls away, and it puts roots down, and it starts a new tree by itself. That's the beauty of it. So gimel means actually to grow to a certain point where it doesn't need its original source. Now it can begin to do something on its own. That's what gamal means. If we find the first time that gamal is used in Chumash is where? I know the answer is going to come from that corner of the room. I'm feeling very confident over here. The first time that gamal is used in Chumash, boom, 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 boom. Eliezer, Eved Avraham, boom, 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 boom. And the answer is, let me find it over here. What do you know? I just opened up to it. In Parshas Vayera. Sometimes you have to see after the Shemaya like that, okay? Ruach HaKodesh, okay. When you open up the Parshas Vayera, when Yitzchak got to be 2 years old, so what does the pasuk say? Vayigdal hayeled. It's beautiful. Vayigdal hayeled. V'yigamal, which means they weaned him away from his mother. Gamal means that also can mean reward, but gamal means he doesn't need his mommy anymore. He stopped nursing. For 2 years, he was nursing. He was getting his nutrients. He was getting his vitamins. He was getting his emotional. His mother was packing his parachute. Sarah was giving his food and his nourishment. He needed mommy. And it says, V'yas Avraham Mishta Gadol, and Avraham made a celebration. He made a Mishta Gadol, a very big party. B'yom Higamal es Yitzchak, on the day that he weaned Yitzchak away. Because the celebration is, he don't need me anymore. He doesn't need his mommy anymore. That's the celebration. That's a Jewish celebration. You understand? So what is Gemilas Chasadim? So Gemilas Chasadim are Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed ala Torah. The avoda, that a Torah is that Hashem is talking to us. Okay, that's the simplest definition. Hashem is talking to us in Torah. We're not going to go into it. And avoda is we're talking to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and we're having a relationship with a Kodesh Baruch Hu. We say Hashem is talking to us, telling us what He wants us to do, and we're telling Hashem this is what we need in order to do what you want us to do. And then the third thing is Gemilas Chasadim. What does it mean, Gemilas Chasadim? Gemilas Chasadim means that it's not just like I see a bumper says, do a random act of kindness. That's not it. A random act of kindness. I loaned somebody my phone for a second. Oh, very nice. Gemilas Chasadim means that you're doing a program of Chesed that gives the person the ability to develop himself so that he can now develop himself and now fend for himself. Like it says in the first Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, "V'hamidu salmidim harbi." They should be stand-up students. I went to one of my rabbis and I said, "Oh, what's the halach over here?" He says, "It's an open. It's a Mishnah Berurah. Take a look at the Mishnah Berurah." I said, but he said, "Look it up in the Mishnah Berurah." He said, "You know how to read the Mishnah Berurah. Well, don't ask me things that you know the answer to." I don't hear that you should be dependent upon me. I should be dependent, like, Rebbe, tie my shoes for me. You're going to come back to your mother after 30 years. They tie my shoes. Well, tie my shoes. Tie your shoes. Balance your checkbook. Get married. Have a job. If you give a man a fish, the Chinese statement is, he has fish for a day. If you teach him how to fish, then he has fish for a lifetime. If you teach somebody how to learn, and they can teach somebody else how to learn, so then that's Gemilas Chesed, that they can teach their child how to learn. You raise somebody that they can become a parent, and they can raise somebody else, and that's Gemilas Chesed. You open up a school, or you do something, you give somebody the tools that they can now earn a living, they can do something else. That's Gemilas Chesed. That's Gemilas Chesedim. That's not just Chesed. Chesed is when they need me. They need me again. You're going to come back to me for another loan. But you put somebody through school, and now they can do it themselves. And now that you train them, they became a trainee by you, and now they can open up their own business. That's Gemilas Chesed. That's Gemilas Chesed. That's the Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed. That's how it got Moshe Kibbutz Torah Messina Masari Yeshuva Su'udiskin. That's how it came 3,325 years through Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed Al Torah Avodah Al Gemilas Chesedim. They got it passed on from generation to generation because somebody taught somebody, and somebody packed somebody's parachute that was now able to pack somebody else's parachute. Don't come back and pack my parachute. Pack somebody else's parachute and go forward. And now we learn out something I think very, very important over here. From this concept, this is the first Mishnah Pirkei Avot. It's the same consistent theme, the first one and the second one. And what's the idea? That although it's Moshe Kibbutz Torah Sinai, Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. So Moshe's a taker? Now, even while a person's in the mode of taking, you come to a shir, or you're going to yeshiva and you have a senior chavrusa, or you're in your years in yeshiva, or you happen to be at home and your parents are giving to you, or somebody else is giving to you, and somebody else is feeding you and taking care of you right now, or you're in school, you're doing some kind of preparatory work or something like that. But you're in the taking mode right now in order to be a giver. That means that even while you're in the taking mode, if your intention is to take it and to carry it forward, then even the taking is giving. Because it's taking on the condition that one is going to be giving. That's the concept. And it's not just taking that we should become recipients for the sake of becoming recipients, but we're recipients that we should be able to give, that we're taking from a Kodesh Baruch Hu in order that we should be able to emulate a Kodesh Baruch Hu and give to somebody else. Then we have a halach to bedrachav that goes in the ways of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's the intention. That's the first ethic. That's the first mussar that we have over here. Is not just to take the gift and to pass it on. So what are we taking and passing it on? So the exercise and taking is to be a receiver, to be a taker, in order that we should become a giver. Kodesh Baruch Hu is giving to us, so we take from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, but we're taking in order that we can emulate a Kodesh Baruch Hu and ultimately become givers. Just like Moshe was Moshe Kibbutz Torah Messina. He received from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, but he understood for Kodesh Baruch Hu was giving to me, I'm going to give to somebody else. My parents gave to me, I'm going to give to somebody else. Somebody packed my parachute, I'm going to pack somebody else's parachute.